charred area was a burned up body in a trunk.
What was found around the body?
It was remnants of a hammer, plastic bag which had been over his head.
It was the hope that with that dental work that they'd actually be able to figure out who this person was.
You have nowhere else to go on it, and then it gets added to a stack of unsolved cases.
Describe the murder.
Forster kicked him from behind down the steps with him landing hard at the bottom.
They drug the trunk into the woods, they doused it in gasoline, and they started it on fire, hoping this stays behind him and nobody ever finds it out.
No one questioned why he was gone.
Hi, I'm Nancy O'Dell. Today's Crime Exposé takes us to Charlotte, Michigan. In this little town of barely 7 miles square, a long-term love affair collapsed abruptly when both partners vanished into the night. It would take the police 2 decades to solve this mystery, and another 2 years to force the killer into court. The story began on a brisk day in March.
A blueberry farmer was traveling into his blueberry field. You had to go down a dirt road. We call it out here a two-track, basically a dirt 2 lanes of road that you would drive up. And to enter into the blueberry field, you had to turn in where there was a gate that had a chain over it.
The farmer headed through the gate, looked to his right, and noticed that a chunk of his property had been burned to a crisp.
And in the middle of that charred area was a burned up body in a trunk. So the blueberry farmer basically looked at him a minute and said, this can't be true, and drove into his blueberry field and kind of did a lap around his blueberry field, hoping that when he came out that, he would either discover that this was some sort of prank or it just wouldn't be there at all.
It was no prank. The body was a deceased male, burned beyond recognition and dumped inside an old footlocker. One phone call later, the county sheriff's office arrived on the scene and began a careful inspection of the terrain.
A lot of things to process at the scene. There was obviously a flammable liquid used, so we processed the part as an arson scene.
What was found around the body?
It was remnants of a fiberglass hammer just outside of the locker, a ratchet wrench handle inside the locker with the body. There were portions of a nylon rope located around his neck, burned up plastic bag which had been over his head, fragments of a wooden baseball bat in the box, what was left of his clothing on him. The body was extensively burned.
And you found something underneath the corpse as well, correct?
When we lifted up the footlocker, there was also a partially unburned section of like a couch cushion also.
Who was the man in the footlocker, and why was he lying in the middle of nowhere?
This is one of the ultimate questions that we'll probably never get the answer to, but why they picked the spot that they did to ultimately dispose of the victim.
After harvesting what they could from the crime scene, investigators chased several promising leads.
They canvassed the area. They could smell accelerants, gasoline. They looked at all the gasoline stations around there to see if there was anyone during that time. Was there any type of videos? And they looked for anything they could.
Nothing useful turned up at any of the local gas stations. Another possibility, the victim had been a migrant worker.
Ottawa County is a large agricultural area, and so they checked all the immigration, the immigrant camps that were around to see if anyone was missing. But no one was missing at that time.
Unfortunately, the scorched and melted body provided no clues to the victim's identity, but his teeth had survived the blaze, and they were unusual.
Dental work that, was just not common. And so it was the hope that with that dental work that they'd actually be able to figure out who this person was.
But there was no match for dental records, and the police were empty-handed once again. The investigation slowly ground to a halt.
We were doing news releases every couple of days, just trying to get information out so we would get something back on the identification.
And this gruesome case now had a nickname.
This is why they called the case, the cold case, originally the Jack in the Box.
The body in the footlocker had a name, a history, a family. But for now, this Jack in the Box remained anonymous.
The case sat on the corner of my desk, and I'd pull it out and look at it and pour through it. And we would try and come up with new ways, new databases to access to try and find information on who it was. We met with the state police and their teams on all their databases, but we just weren't hitting on anything at that point. It gets to the point where we really didn't have a lot more to investigate.
Normally we don't have a lot of cold cases. So this is one that, obviously it was very, very unique. One of the big things with cold cases is typically cold cases don't get any better with age. That's why they're called cold cases. Eventually all the leads run out, and you have nowhere else to go on it, and then it gets added to a stack of unsolved cases.
Detectives wanted to unmask the killer, someone so disturbed that they would brutalize, discard, and cremate another human being.
I received a couple of emails one evening that she possibly had some information about a cold case.
Marooned in a remote field in Michigan, the badly burned Jack in the Box, as the body was nicknamed, remained anonymous, and the investigation into his murder had grown cold. The deadlock persisted for 13 agonizing years until a lucky break kicked the case back into gear.
I received a couple of emails one evening. The header information on the email was that it was from Deneen Ducharme, and that she had possibly had some information about a cold case.
Deneen Ducharme was the daughter of Beverly McCallum, who had resided in the town of Charlotte many years before. Deneen's grandmother had died recently, but Deneen was furious at her mother. Why?
Something occurred between Deneen Ducharme and Beverly McCallum. There was a fight. Deneen Ducharme didn't feel that she was being treated fairly by Beverly McCallum in regards to what her grandmother had left for the family.
And then I understand Deneen provided information that restarted the investigation. What'd she say?
That individual who was found dead in that blueberry farmer's field may have been Robert Caraballo.
Robert Caraballo was 37, originally from the Dominican Republic, and recently out of prison again. But this time he was determined to go straight.
All indications that we hear from people that knew him, he was doing the best he could at fixing his life, getting away from that lifestyle. He was at a bunch of odd jobs, and when he was home, he would read his Bible. He was a baseball fan. He was trying to get on with his life.
Robert had met Beverly Callum a decade earlier, and each of them pursued their own criminal ambitions. Police say in Beverly's household, drugs and petty larceny were part of daily life.
She would try and find ways to make money using her family, a lot of fraud things. We also know that by the time she came to our attention, there were about 5 to 6 aliases, different names she'd used in the past, most of them associated with different men she had spent time with.
One of those men she spent time with was Robert Caraballo, but their relationship was far from perfect.
From what I could gather, it was a volatile relationship. When Beverly McCallum wanted to fight, he basically would just go down to his basement to get away from it, that he wasn't going to participate in the fighting anymore.
Beverly's daughter, Deneen Ducharme, was also tired of fighting and living a life overloaded with theft and drugs.
Beverly would use her a lot to steal things, take things. Deneen talks about moving around a lot as a child. She said she was like 18 or so before she knew what her actual real name was and who her father was.
The daughter testified at the trial that mom was still heavily into alcohol. She was using crack cocaine at the time, and she would sometimes do that with either her daughter Deneen or Christopher McMillan.
Christopher McMillan was a family friend. A construction worker at the time, he hit it off with Deneen at a convenience store and then spent a lot of time hanging around Beverly's house. Since Deneen had suggested that the dead body in the footlocker was Robert Caraballo, the police took a second look at the unique dental work of the corpse.
A federal marshal was able to expedite me getting dental records from the federal prison system, and we were able to match the victim's dental records with the prison records, and that's where the identification being Robert Caraballo came.
With the investigation catching fire again, detectives wanted to talk to Beverly McCallum, but she had skipped town a long time ago.
30 days after Robert's dead, Beverly McCallum has packed everything up from her house up in Charlotte, sold the house, and has moved to the Caribbean. She's never told a soul that Robert's gone, and no one in Ottawa County had any idea that Robert was gone, nor why would they be, because Robert wasn't from the area.
Meanwhile, Deneen Ducharme and Christopher McMillan had also moved away from Michigan. If they had anything to do with the murder of Robert Caraballo, they were certainly making it tough for law enforcement to find them.
Everybody involved is in a different state or a different country, and, hoping this stays behind them and nobody ever finds it out.
Beverly McCallum had moved the farthest, and it would take an international manhunt to bring her home.
The notice was put out pretty much around the world that she was charged with open murder and first-degree conspiracy to commit murder, and that we were looking to extradite her.
They would not give her back to the United States.
Law enforcement wanted to talk to Beverly Callum about the murder of her lover, Robert Caraballo, also known as the Jack-in-the-Box. But Beverly, always an eager traveler, left town, flew overseas, and was rapidly collecting new passport stamps in Jamaica, Pakistan, and Italy.
And the notice was put out pretty much around the world that she was charged with, open murder and first-degree conspiracy to commit murder, both life offenses without the possibility of parole, and that we were looking to extradite her.
The Italian police captured Beverly, but she had one more card to play. She appealed to the European Union for help. Their Human Rights Commission refused to extradite Beverly on a charge of murder one.
Without agreeing to change those charges to second-degree murder, they would not give her back to us. And so ultimately we decided to do that because our job is to seek justice for the victims and families of victims. And after fighting for almost 2 years, we were able to finally get her back to the United States.
Maybe now investigators could answer the critical question: how did Robert Caraballo end up burned beyond recognition near a blueberry field in Michigan? The two 20-somethings within Beverly's domain, her daughter, Deneen Ducharme, and friend Christopher McMillan, were already chatting with police. And the house of cards that was Beverly's complicated life began to topple quickly, starting with Christopher McMillan.
Detectives go and knock on his door, and within 5 to 6 minutes, Chris begins to confess. And he pretty much gives a full confession over the 3 or 4 interviews that he has with the detectives, and is finally arrested. And after he is arrested, he admits that what he did was a crime, and agrees that he would testify for the prosecution against Deneen Ducharme and Beverly McCallum.
How did Christopher describe the murder?
He and Deneen were down in the basement of the home, and they could hear Robert and Beverly arguing upstairs. And the next thing they knew, he was starting down the steps, and Beverly pushed or kicked him from behind down the steps, with him landing hard at the bottom.
Police say Beverly, ever manipulative, had convinced Christopher and Deneen to help her execute Robert Caraballo.
That's when McMillan, if you would believe his testimony, he had this bat that he swung at the victim. He intentionally missed, according to him.
Deneen grabbed a hammer at that point and began striking Robert in the head.
Apparently she's not hitting hard enough, so that's when Beverly starts screaming, "Give me the hammer, give me the hammer."
Beverly took that hammer and proceeded to strike Robert multiple times on the left side of the head.
Robert was laying on the ground, unconscious, bleeding profusely. Beverly put a plastic bag over his head, and they tied it around his head with a rope they had there.
He was still breathing. He could still see his chest going up and down very, very slightly. He could still see the bag over top of the victim's head moving somewhat. And then after about 2 minutes, he just stopped breathing, and at that point, he would have been dead.
And then it was time to get rid of the body.
They loaded it up in this old metal footlocker that Beverly McCallum owned. They put it into a van.
And then they drove 100 miles to a blueberry field near the coast of Lake Michigan.
They dragged the trunk into the woods. They doused it in gasoline, and they started it on fire. Then they took off. They left the scene.
Christopher McMillan would testify against his accomplices in exchange for a minimum 15 years in prison. Deneen Ducharme was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. Beverly McCallum, the mastermind of this brutal murder under the terms of her extradition, was charged with murder in the second degree and was given 40 to 60 years behind bars.
We were lucky that we got a couple of really good leads that ultimately ended up, one, solving the case, and two, bringing justice to the different victims involved.
And for the late Robert Caraballo, perhaps there was some justice that the murderous trio could not harm anyone else for the time being.
You know, here was a situation where Robert was attempting to just become a normal member of the community, but yet, obviously hadn't succeeded far enough that no one questioned why he was gone.
It took 20 years, but Robert Caraballo, aka the Jack in the Box case, was finally closed. Beverly McCallum was grounded, her jet-setting ways now confined to the walls of the prison in which she was incarcerated. And now, it's time for today's Safety Spotlight. While disagreements and arguments are a natural part of family dynamics, it is crucial to recognize when such conflicts escalate into verbal and emotional abuse. This often serves as a warning sign that physical violence may follow. Additionally, engaging in a relationship with someone involved in criminal activity can heighten your risk of violence and entangle you in their illegal actions. If you find yourself in an abusive relationship with a family member or partner, or if your partner is involved in criminal activities, it is important to consider ending the relationship and notifying the authorities. For further support and resources, reach out to the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-SAFE. For all of us at Crime Exposé, please join us next time and stay safe.